This is a reading of Theory and Practice by Jürgen Habermas, translated by John Viertel. Introduction. Some difficulties in the attempt to link theory and praxis. In the preface to the first German edition, I held out the prospect of a systematic investigation into the relationship between theory and praxis. I have not progressed much beyond this announcement of intent, but this does not mean that since that time I have neglected this theme. On the contrary, my published work since then shows that the problem has in no way relaxed its hold on me. This new edition of Theory and Practice, fourth German edition, presents a welcome opportunity for me to ascertain in a retrospective view, of necessity a somewhat hasty one, where the studies I have undertaken up to this point have led me. Theory and Praxis. The investigations collected in this volume, in which the orientation has been predominantly historical, were to develop the idea of a theory of society conceived with a practical intention, and to delimit its status with respect to theories of different origins. Historical materialism aims at achieving an explanation of social evolution which is so comprehensive that it embraces the interrelationships of the theory's own origins and application. The theory specifies the conditions under which reflection on the history of our species by members of this species themselves has become objectively possible. And at the same time, it names those to whom this theory is addressed, who then, with its aid, can gain enlightenment about their emancipatory role in the process of history. The theory occupies itself with reflection on the interrelationships of its origin and with anticipation of those of its application, and thus sees itself as a necessary catalytic moment within the social complex of life, which it analyzes. And this complex it analyzes as integral interconnections of compulsions from the viewpoint of the possible sublation, resolution, and abolition of all this. The theory thus encompasses a dual relationship between theory and praxis. On the one hand, it investigates the constitutive historical complex of the constellation of self-interests to which the theory still belongs across and beyond its acts of insight. On the other hand, it studies the historical interconnections of action in which the theory, as action-oriented, can intervene. In the one case, we have a social praxis, which, as societal synthesis, makes insight possible. In the other case, a political praxis, which consciously aims at overthrowing the existing system of institutions. Because of its reflection on its own origins, critique is to be distinguished from science as well as from philosophy, for the sciences focus away from their constitutive contexts and confront the domain of their subject matter with an objectivistic posture. While obversely, philosophy has been only too conscious of its origins as something that had ontological primacy. By anticipating the context of its own application, critique differs from what Horkheimer has called, quote, traditional theory, unquote. Critique understands that its claims to validity can be verified only in the successful process of enlightenment, and that means in the practical discourse of those concerned. Critique renounces the contemplative claims of theories constructed in monologic form, and in addition discerns that all philosophy up till now, in spite of all its claims, also only presumes to have such a contemplative character. To be sure, these assertions are not systematically developed in this volume, but only treated in connection with the history of the problem, in which the Aristotelian distinction between praxis and techne serves as the connecting thread. As opposed to the classical doctrine of natural law, modern social philosophy can assert its claims to a competitive status, to be taken seriously from a scientific viewpoint only at the cost of a separation from that connection with experience which practical philosophy maintains. Social philosophy, having taken on monologic form, is no longer capable of essentially relating to praxis, but merely to goal-directed purposive action guided by social technical recommendations. Within this framework, historical materialism can be understood as a theory of society conceived with a practical intent, which avoids the complementary weaknesses both of traditional politics and of modern social philosophy. It thus unites the claim to a scientific character with a theoretical structure referring to praxis. In later investigations, I have sought to clarify further three aspects of the relation between theory and praxis. 1. The empirical aspect of the relationship between science, politics, and public opinion in advanced capitalistic social systems. 2. The epistemological aspect of the relation between knowledge and interest. 3. The methodological aspect of a social theory which aims at being capable of assuming the role of a critique.